The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
If you believe Republicans, then you are probably aware that a dominant theme over the last several months, really actually several years, has been this explosive spending spree that Democrats led by Barack Obama have been on. And the argument has been really created by Republicans, and a lot of opinion makers have actually picked up on it without doing any kind of even a cursory examination of the actual numbers, okay? And this has been shaping the public debate really for a while, Lewis, and it's really been the context for a lot of different debates, including when thinking about funding or not funding different things. A lot of times the context, the base where people are parting from is Obama has blown up spending.
Mm-hmm. I mean, thinking back on past elections, the spending thing was, I wouldn't say it was a major point of the last election, but it was definitely there. And before that, it was all about, defense, terrorism, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it's pretty fascinating that this is the focus point now, but I guess that makes sense after a recession. And
well, it makes sense, but it's flat out false, right? I mean, the numbers that we're getting about Barack Obama's presidency just couldn't be less accurate. We hear all the time the debt has risen from 10.6 trillion to 15.6 trillion under Barack Obama's watch. Sounds like it would make for an easy partisan attack, right? Look, Obama president, debt rises, that's what we're talking about. Not the case, though. If we actually look at the bulk of that increase, it was actually caused by a combination of revenue losses during 2008, 2009, and that economic downturn, as well as the Bush-era tax cuts and automatic increases in safety net spending that, while they took place during President Obama's watch, they were already put in place by, I know we're not supposed to mention him, Lewis, the previous guy, George W. Bush. Let's actually put the chart up now, and then we can actually look at what the reality of this is. Let me see if I can, I also need to pull it up myself. So let's take a look at this chart here. If we look at back to Ronald Reagan in 1982, if we look at federal spending growth, okay, Reagan 8.7% and then Reagan's second term 4.9%, George H.W. Bush 5.4%, Clinton 3.2 and 3.9%, very, very low, the lone Democrat that we've listed so far. Under George W. Bush, annualized federal spending growth went way up, 7.3% during Bush's first term. And then if you include, and you have to, right, if you include these increases that Bush put in place that are being calculated under Obama's watch by some, 8.1% federal spending growth annualized during George W. Bush's second term. Let's look at Barack Obama, 1.4%. The lowest annualized federal spending growth in the United States since Ronald Reagan took office in 1982. Not really going to hear that when we have what is supposedly a honest debate about the budget on Fox News and a number of mainstream media outlets. You're just not going to hear the fact that it's actually the lowest since 1982 under President Barack Obama.
of course, that's growth. It has been growing throughout.
It has been growing throughout.
And I'm just curious, does this account for inflation?
Probably
not.
That's a good question. I think that this is absolute growth. Natan, do you know offhand on that? You're not sure? Yeah, that's a good question.
But yeah, I mean, it's still impressive that it was that low, especially compared to Bush.
Well, the incredible thing is that President Obama has actually passed legislation that limits growth, right? I mean, in February of 2010, he passed a law that says that new spending laws must be paid for, okay? And Obama signed into law over $2 trillion in debt reduction over the next decade. I know Republicans like to just say, well, no, it's technicalities and the safety of the country, patriotism, Muslim Kenyan Indonesia, that's the kind of thing you hear. But that's the reality. Those are just facts.
Right. Yeah, the numbers speak for themselves.
The problem is that there's nuance there, right? And how we've talked time and time again, Lewis, how do you explain nuance to people, particularly to right-wing voters?
And when you factor in just carefully calculated speech, you can correctly say that Obama increased government spending.
He did, absolutely.
By 1.3%.
By less than any president going back to Ronald Reagan in 1980.
But you can still count on the right saying that.
You can. Mm-hmm. There's a horrific story out of Brazil about a 9-year-old Catholic girl who was raped by her stepfather and then excommunicated from the church. The rapist was allowed to stay in the church, Lewis. No problem there.
Wow. All right.
The accusation from the church was life must always be protected. That was a senior Vatican cleric who defended the church's decision to excommunicate the mother and doctors of this 9-year-old rape victim who had a life-saving abortion in Brazil. Remember, in Brazil, abortion laws are pretty strict, okay? And only in cases of rape, incest, medical emergency are abortions even on the table, okay? And still the church saying, you know, those children that she was pregnant with twins, those children had the right to live and they could not be eliminated. And those are innocent persons. Life must always be protected. Now, the police believe that the girl was sexually assaulted for years by her stepfather, possibly since she was as young as 6 years old. I mean, this is a despicable situation. She's the one who needs to leave the church. The rapist didn't do something as bad. At least he didn't kill anybody, right?
Right. I mean, this is, of course, this isn't the case of someone in the church committing a crime like this. So I'm not going to say this is the most despicable thing church side that has happened. No. But
Lewis, it continues this idea that the church thinks child abuse isn't as serious as a medically necessary abortion.
Right.
Which is not new. That's exactly what we've been saying for years.
Because any violent act that happens is God's plan, right?
I guess it must be.
It was God's plan for that girl to
the
be
abuse
pregnant.
must have been God's plan. The pregnancy must have been God's plan.
Mass pedophilia must be God's plan.
Abortion isn't God's plan.
Under that logic, though, wouldn't abortion also be part of God's plan? I mean, people created by God and their brain and thought processes created by God developed
abortion is the only time people are actually choosing their actions.
Right, yeah. Free will doesn't exist.
That makes sense.
When it comes to abortion.
Right.
Yeah, it's really sickening. And you know, I'm almost numb to the Catholic Church's incipient support, implicit support of bigotry via gay marriage, pedophilia by not looking into and or not prosecuting and or covering up child abuse within the church. I feel like the stories don't even get through to a lot of people because people are just so numb. This is what the Catholic Church does around the world.
Yeah, and it's such a massive organization. What do you do about it? I mean, the church runs its own investigations, and those investigations are why the information got leaked.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy.
It really is. And when is the Catholic Church going to lose tax-exempt status? That's really the only remaining question. And when are we going to see...
we've talked about this before. Once the Catholic Church loses that, so do all other religious organizations.
When will we see Catholic Church officials being paraded into court in arm and leg shackles? I mean, when? I don't know. Maybe never.
Hopefully soon.
There you go. I always get, it makes me laugh whenever I hear about Republican strategists complain that it's so unfair that Democrats enjoy a significant advantage among Latino voters right now, particularly overwhelming if you don't include Cuban voters in that. And then you come across something like Republican Congressman Steve King reminding us why Latino voters, rightly so, don't want to vote for Republicans. Here's Steve King comparing Latino voters to dogs, cattle, beans, and corn. Let's take a listen to this. Listen carefully here because you've really got to pay attention to what he's saying here.
A little bit, and what do you want? You want a good bird dog, and you want one that's going to be aggressive? Pick the one that's the friskiest, the one that's engaged the most, and not the one that's over there sleeping in the corner. If you want a pet to sit on the couch, it's the one that's sleeping in the corner. But that's, so you get the pick of the litter, and you got yourself a pretty good bird dog. Well, we got the pick of every donor civilization on the planet because it's hard to get here. They had to be inspired to come. We got the bigger from the planet to come to America, whichever generation it was, and then we taught our children that same thing.
Okay, so much the same way that when you pick a dog, you're going to want to pick the best of the litter, Lewis. Here in the U.S., we're lucky enough that when we get all this immigration coming in, basically we can just pick who we want. The same way that you might pick a dog or cattle, you can just pick the best immigrants that you want working for you because it's very similar, apparently, in Steve King's mind. It's the same type of ideology. Fascinating.
You know, I'm not sure what to think of this. It could just be a really very poorly worded analogy.
You know what? I would give you that. I would give you that. And Natan, are you thinking the same thing?
I was thinking that it might be that.
Let's look at King's history.
Don't get me wrong. The concept is ridiculous.
Let's look at King's history, okay? He's previously compared Latino immigrants to cattle, as well as farming commodities like beans and corn. And now he is adding in the dog comparison. So this is nothing new for Steve King, okay? And it's all part of this mainstreaming that he's been involved in of falsehoods, demeaning falsehoods, and downright hateful rhetoric related to Latino immigrants. If it were the one thing he said, Lewis, I'd say, yeah, probably a bad analogy. But what a coincidence that every single analogy Steve King makes to immigrants is either to some kind of animal or even lower than that, some kind of food commodity.
A vegetable.
A vegetable.
Yeah, I guess if you factor in all of these occurrences, a pattern emerges.
There you go.
Yeah.
On the bonus show today, we'll be talking about the newest food recall. We'll also talk about Roger Ailes claiming that Jon Stewart basically admitted to him that he's a socialist. And also Orthodox Jews holding a massive meeting to protest the internet. What's that all about? Get the bonus show, davidpakman.com/membership. You'll also get the full 1-hour TV version of the show, a new member benefit. Sign up. We'll take a break and be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Support the David Pakman Show for free by doing all your Amazon.com shopping through the black banner at davidpakman.com. You can also become a David Pakman Show member, which is of course made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Lewis sometimes gazes into that cereal bowl he has every single morning. I don't know how he does it. And he thinks he sees liberal bias in there. He is not alone. You can find out more at liberalbias.com. Matt Larson, a new David Pakman Show member. Oh boy. And you know what's interesting? It's Matt spelled with an S on the end. And I think it would be incorrect to say Matts. I think it is just a European spelling of short for Matthew, right?
I don't know. I've never seen this spelling before.
Natan, what do you think on that?
M-A-T-S?
Yeah.
No, I've actually seen that. I'm pretty sure it's Mats. There was a tennis player, I think his name was Mats Wilander.
All right, well,
Yeah.
Mats Larson then. I apologize. I stand corrected, Lewis.
All right.
Thank you. You love that music, don't you?
It's so great.
Government propaganda might be legalized. The obvious question is, who knew it was already illegal? An amendment that would legalize the use of propaganda on American audiences is being inserted into the latest defense authorization bill, according to BuzzFeed. The amendment would, quote, strike the current ban on domestic dissemination of propaganda material produced by the State Department and the Independent Broadcasting Board of Governors, according to the summary of the law at the House Rules Committee's website. This would basically neutralize two previous acts. A lot of people probably don't realize this, Lewis, but there actually are two previous acts, the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948 and the Foreign Relations Authorization Act of 1987, which have already been passed to protect audiences from the government's own misinformation campaigns. Most people don't even know that those exist.
I feel like entire presidential campaigns are misinformation campaigns.
Well, that's different. That is not State Department propaganda.
That's true.
That's campaign.
And there's plenty of military propaganda.
No question. Most of it, though, geared overseas. And apparently it's so effective. In other words, campaigns at raising the opinion of our military operations elsewhere, they're being considered so effective overseas that why not bring them back and institute them here in the U.S. as well?
Yeah, why not? It's legal.
This was a very almost completely unnoticed press release that went out last week, and it's buried between a bunch of other higher profile issues in the $642 billion defense bill. It's a bipartisan amendment sponsored by Congressman Mac Thornberry from Texas and Congressman Adam Smith from Washington State. And basically what the argument is that because of the internet age, the current law ties the hands of America's diplomatic officials, military, and others by inhibiting our ability to effectively communicate in a credible way. Wait a second. So
propaganda is credible?
You need to remove propaganda restrictions to communicate in a more credible way? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, it does to someone. Who? I'm not sure.
So the big surprise here, of course, is that there is a ban on propaganda. I mean, in the private sector, we already have a huge propaganda outlet called Fox News. Okay, that's one specific type of propaganda. How is propaganda being defined here, though? I mean, knowingly saying something you know isn't true to influence opinion. Colin Powell admitted to doing that in his presentations in the lead up to the Iraq War. He basically said, I knew the information wasn't good, and I went with it anyway to make the case. He admitted he was wrong.
Yeah, well, is there a difference between not knowing that your information is 100% accurate,
right,
or not knowing that it's completely false?
Knowing that it's completely false.
Knowing that it's completely false.
It's a good question. I mean, look at how popular the Iraq War was initially going into it, even with the anti-propaganda laws in place. Natan, some people are emailing me saying, is this a big deal or is this not a big deal? Given the amount of misinformation people already have circulating, it seems removing these restrictions is a huge deal.
It seems like it. It's just hard to distinguish between this type of propaganda and the type of sort of common use of the word propaganda that we use every day.
Well,
to
that's
describe,
the question. What is the
BS.
definition? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess we don't know.
I don't know.
Want me to look it up?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that we're going to find a legal definition. We're going to find a dictionary definition.
Yeah, well, good luck finding a legal definition.
I mean, we can't even find a legal definition of marriage, if you believe our guest last week.
A form of communication that is aimed at influencing the attitude of a community towards some cause or position. Propaganda is usually repeated and dispersed over a wide variety of media in order to create the desired result in audience attitudes.
Yeah, I mean, that's Fox News is propaganda, according to that. So is advertising.
So it's not necessarily disinformation or misinformation. It could be completely factual, but it is
designed to influence.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that that's really applicable to this specific scenario. We're really talking about another level altogether here.
Yeah, because I suppose if there were a ban on whatever we're talking about, it probably was not 100% factual information that we were dealing with.
I agree.
All right.
Sarah Palin had a hilarious robocall failure where residents of Kansas had the pleasure of picking up their phones and hearing Sarah Palin herself robocalling for senatorial candidate Ted Cruz. His dad fled Cuba seeking freedom, Palin said, and he's a true conservative. You can trust him, etc. Please vote today through May 25th. Please vote early for Ted Cruz for U.S. Senate. The only problem is that Ted Cruz, the Tea Party Express candidate, isn't running in Kansas. He's running in Texas. In her defense, it's not clear that Sarah Palin personally had anything to do with the mistake. It is funny, though, when the queen of anti-intellectualism is used in such a boneheaded way to robocall people in the wrong state altogether.
Yeah. I mean, if it were me answering that phone, I probably wouldn't have even heard the message at all, because the second I realize it's a robocall, I hang up.
Yeah, same here. You know what's interesting? They have this never too dumb attitude in the Tea Party. Maybe the robocall to the wrong state will actually help his credibility among that crowd.
Well, I was thinking that maybe it's some kind of a brilliant strategy where the people they robocalled were all relatives of the people in Texas who would actually be motivated to vote when those relatives in the other state let them know about this robocall.
I don't think they're that smart.
Yeah, I don't think it's that sophisticated.
I just don't think so. It's obviously Obama's fault that she got the wrong area codes, you know? You betcha.
Sure. Good strategy.
All right. After President Obama's marriage equality support announcement, there were questions about would we actually see any shift at all in public opinion of marriage equality. And it turns out that opposition to same-sex marriage has hit an all-time low. Public opinion continuing to shift, Lewis, in favor of full marriage equality. There's a new Washington Post ABC poll which shows that initial signs that support for the idea from Obama may have changed a few minds seems to be holding steady. Are you surprised about this, that just a statement from Obama on this could change people's opinion?
No. I think a lot of people are easily influenced, for better or worse. I mean, I'm not talking about this specific situation, but
Sure.
I think the president definitely has some pull when it comes to that.
I think there's two things going on here. One is that some people may be changing their opinion, but what's probably even more likely is that people are just willing to admit their position now,
Yeah, I
because
think
now
you're right.
they feel like, oh, well, now it's not just something that crazy left-wing people support; it's something that our president supports. So they feel, you know, it's legitimate to actually come out.
But how many people think our president is a crazy left-winger?
Too many.
Over 53% of Americans now say that gay marriage should be legal, hitting the high mark in support and showing a huge turnaround from 6 years ago, where only 36% thought that it should be legal. 39%, which is a new low, say that gay marriage should be illegal. Also interesting, there were a lot of questions about how African Americans would react to this because, Lewis, as we know, there are many African Americans more religious and often more against gay marriage. It turns out that 59% of African Americans now say they support same-sex marriage, up from an average of 41% in polls leading up to the announcement. So certainly we see an influence. That was we had this kind of silly, I found it a silly question. Will black voters abandon Obama for Romney because of the announcement? Absolutely no chance.
Yeah, I don't see that happening at all. No way.
Also, Jewish groups backing Obama on gay marriage. I like this because, you know, oftentimes we hear about how Jewish voters, although they typically vote Democratic, a lot of times their views on Israel may not align with the average Democratic voter, supporter, etc. A new poll that's been put out by the Public Religion Research Institute found 81% of Jews support gay marriage, higher than African Americans, higher than the general population. Very, very reaffirming numbers. I like that. Being Jewish myself and a strong supporter of marriage equality, I mean, 81%, given the stereotype of social conservatism among American Jews, to me is very, very high.
Yeah, I'm not trying to preach here, but the Jews are usually slightly ahead of the curve when it comes to
oh boy,
when it comes to things like this. I mean, they, you know, allowing women to be rabbis and so forth.
Yeah, although the super Orthodox groups, Natan, are reasserting their opposition to gay marriage, and on the bonus show we'll talk about how they're reasserting their opposition to internet porn and gambling.
I mean, I don't like to factor in the radical groups because you can pick them from any religion and they're pretty much identical.
The difference being, though, that in a lot of religions, the radical groups make up a significantly bigger portion. I mean, Natan, what percentage of Jews, of self-described Jews, identify as Orthodox?
Well, it depends what you consider Orthodox. If you only consider Hasidim to be Orthodox, then it's probably less than 10%. But if you include modern Orthodox, which still have women on the opposite side of the synagogue or temple, as it's sometimes called, then it's more. I don't know what percentage, maybe 20% or 30%.
I think that you may be a little high on those estimates.
I'm not sure.
Lewis, anything else on that?
I don't know about those numbers. Yeah, I have no idea.
But Lewis, you are, of course, a Jewish Iranian, and you support marriage equality as well.
Yeah, that's right.
That is compelling to many people.
It is.
And exciting to some.
I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the idea of a cross-cultural support of basic rights is an exciting thing.
Yeah, I mean, me just being a Jewish Iranian, Polish, Lithuanian is American.
Muslim, Kenyan, Indonesian, Native American.
You know, I'm like...
You're like Obama.
Maybe I should run for office.
All right. Big conspiracy. Lewis has been working up this conspiracy. He's already got 12 or 1,300 different Social Security numbers and like 12 birth certificates. It's pretty incredible.
I've got some master forgers on my side for this.
Please join us on Facebook, facebook.com/David Pakman Show, and get a David Pakman Show t-shirt or hoodie. They're made from 100% recycled materials. Go to davidpakman.com/gear. Pick one up. We'll take a break. We'll be back next with Carl Frisch. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Take a second to donate your Twitter or Facebook accounts through donateyouraccount.com/David Pakman Show. It takes a second, really helps the show. Let's get into my interview with Carl Frisch. We spoke to him just before the start of today's show. Joining me is Carl Frisch. He's a Democratic strategist at Bullfight Strategies. Carl, we've been talking over the last day, week, month about what's going to be the best tactic for Democrats and the Obama campaign to go after Mitt Romney. And the question is not really what is there about Mitt Romney to go after, right? It's almost like there's really too much. I mean, we've talked about his incredible patriotism claims, which then ended up with him supporting the Vietnam War, but actually going to France as a Mormon missionary, his supposed job creation at Bain, which resulted in the destruction of countless jobs. He profited handily, though. And then there's the flip-flopping on absolutely every issue. So Is it going to be actually more difficult in a way because, as we know, the country, by and large, does not like nuance, and if you have to go into detail and explain why Romney isn't a good candidate, it may actually be a negative thing. What do you think? What's the best tactic?
Well, I think the way that they're going after Bain right now is pretty good, contrary to what the Bain in the rear end mayor of Newark might say. I think talking about Bain in the terms that they have been, that this is about real people, this is about people who have lost their jobs, is a good thing, because that connects on an emotional level with people, and you don't have to get too complicated about what the financial services industry is. You just have to talk about what Mitt Romney did, and the reason, remember, that we're talking about Bain Capital is not because of some vendetta against that industry, although it does need many reforms. It's because that's what Mitt Romney talks about. Mitt Romney talks about, on any given day, whether it's 100,000 jobs, whether it's tens of thousands of jobs, whether it's thousands of jobs. This is what Mitt Romney is claiming. Of course, it's not true. And in fact, he's been responsible for the firing of many, many people so that he could profit. But that's why we're talking about this.
The one thing on that I wonder, though, is I was just reading, and the polling agency escapes me, but I looked at a poll today that says only 53% of Americans even know what Bain Capital is right now. So while I agree with you that it's a compelling case and that it's one that Romney has made the forefront of his supposed qualifications to be president, so that's really why we're talking about it, it doesn't at least yet seem to be getting through to the average person, only to about 1 in 2.
Sure. Well, I'm surprised that many people know what Bain is. Because frankly, as much as it was talked about in the Republican primary, remember, people don't follow politics the way that you and I do. They don't read the paper every day, that antiquated system of news delivery. They don't go online to check the blogs every day. They don't check out programs like this or the MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. When Fox News has a good day, 3 million people tune in. There are 300 million people in this country, more than half of which vote. So I'm not surprised that few people know about what Bain is, and it's the responsibility of Democrats, progressives, the president's campaign, the Democratic Party, to get out there and educate people. But remember, people are not going to engage in this race until after the conventions. It's just the way it's always been. It's unfortunate that people don't engage earlier on. But let's remember, they've got a lot of things to worry about. They've got to worry about putting, to borrow a phrase from the previous president, putting food on their family, keeping their job or jobs, as the case might be. So it's not, surprising that they're not engaged in this process just yet. But I have a feeling that even when Mitt Romney loses in November, people may not know what Bain is, but they will know that Mitt Romney was not good for jobs. The reason we're talking about Bain, which, by the way, happened before he was governor of Massachusetts, is because we're not talking about him being governor either. And I have a feeling we'll get to that eventually.
We will. My concern, though, is, again, when we think about simple arguments versus nuanced arguments, when someone, and I don't know who it will be, but somebody inevitably will come after him and say, you talked about your job creation successes at Bain. You were governor of Massachusetts, and during that time, Massachusetts was 47th in job creation. Okay.
Well, to be fair, the only reason it was 47 is because the 3 states ahead of it, or behind it rather, were hit by Hurricane Katrina. So
fair enough, but so then he can very simply come back and say, progressive legislature, I couldn't do anything. And then I worry that that's going to resonate with voters.
Well, it might with some people, but I don't think it will with independents. There are plenty of Republican governors representing New England states at that time, Connecticut, Rhode Island, other places, Delaware, and they did just fine in terms of job creation in that period. It was Mitt Romney's failure as a governor. But it goes directly to what he thinks the responsibility of government is. He thinks, and he says it on the stump every single day, that he will take his business experience into the White House when he goes there, or if he goes there. Well, he did the same thing in Massachusetts, and look what it got us. Mitt Romney's not concerned about creating jobs. He's concerned about passing wealth on to his rich friends.
Do you think that if Democrats and President Obama take a more kind of shotgun approach where you want to hit all of the different weaknesses of Mitt Romney as opposed to being hyper-focused on one, that it would seem more effective, that the reaction from the average voter would be, look, they're just criticizing the guy for anything they can and negatively affect the perception? What are the risks and rewards to a kind of shotgun strategy?
Well, I think you end up confusing people if you don't take a methodical approach that the president's campaign is doing right now. It also is a lot more difficult for somebody watching at home to engage on an emotional level when the attack is too scattered. I think what the president's campaign is doing precisely right. You've got to slowly seed these issues with people, show them specific examples, show them real people that have been impacted by Mitt Romney's tactics. These are people just like anybody else that did nothing wrong. They showed up for work. They did their work. They raised their families. They were contributing to their communities. And Mitt Romney's company came in, and as the story has been told many, many times, they would pile them up with debt, reap their rewards, push those companies into bankruptcy, and fire all the employees. And that's not something people want. I think the reason, the economy has struggled to get back on track. Under any other circumstances, this race would be going to the party not in power. The reason it is so close, the reason that women and young people and independents and the elderly, according to the latest MSNBC poll, all favor Obama, is because they don't trust Mitt Romney. And as much as the right wing hates it when we talk about George W. Bush, they don't want to return to those policies. And remember, it was Mitt Romney's own economic advisor who said Romney's policies would be George Bush's policies on steroids.
That's a scary thought for sure. Okay, Carl, we've been speaking with Carl Frisch. He is a Democratic strategist at Bullfight Strategies. We'll definitely have you back on as the campaign continues.
Well, and don't forget to check your local bookstores, because George W. Bush is coming out with a book this fall. This is not a joke.
Yeah.
How to fix the economy.
I know. I said I hope for $25 you at least get crayons with it.
Well, yeah, I wasn't sure if the reports have indicated whether it was a pop-up book or a coloring book yet. But,
connect the dots, maybe. All right,
yeah.
Carl, talk to you soon.
Thanks, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show is mostly funded by individual memberships, like the one you can get at davidpakman.com/membership. You'll get the regular show commercial-free, video of the entire 1-hour TV show, as well as the bonus show in both audio and video format, as well as an archive of all shows and bonus shows, Lewis, that dates back to August of 2005. It's pretty remarkable. That's why you have, what, 3.5 million memberships at this point?
Yeah, roughly.
Lewis's memberships total basically the GDP of some smaller countries.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how I'm doing it, but
it's incredible.
I mean, the debt is really piling on.
Well, it's just like with Obama, right? Oh,
right.
Wait, no, we dispelled that earlier in the show. davidpakman.com/membership. Sign up today. We talked earlier in the week about this bogus story of Arizona Secretary of State Ken Bennett starting to say that he really needs to see whether Barack Obama is eligible to be on the ballot for president in Arizona, basically buying into the entire birther nonsense, even though he denied actually being a birther. I'll follow up on that in a second, but first thing, we covered the story as a goof, as in like, look at how outrageous this entire thing is and the fact that we have elected officials presumably taking this seriously. Fox News makes a big deal out of distinguishing between hard news and opinion journalism. In fact, at the end of Shepard Smith's 7 to 8 o'clock news hour now, he says that does it, something along the lines of that's it for hard news, now starts opinion and analysis, almost as a pushback to criticisms that it's not totally clear when is it hard news and when isn't it. Well, if Shepard Smith is on 7 to 8 p.m., we know the 6 p.m. Eastern show is Special Report for Brett Baer. Hard news, Lewis, okay? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, hard-hitting, factual news.
Right. Here is how they are covering the birther nonsense. Serious coverage on, as serious as it can be on Fox News, during the hard news segments on Fox News. Take a look at this.
Pickings from the political grapevine. Arizona's Secretary of State Ken Bennett says he's been asking for 2 months for Hawaiian officials to prove President Obama was born there.
Wow.
Hawaiian officials won't budge until Bennett satisfies a number of requirements, and both sides disagree about whether he's actually done it. Bennett says he might remove President Obama from the ballot in Arizona
There you go.
if the proof doesn't arrive from Hawaii soon. A move Democratic critics say is politically calculated and aimed at capturing support from a fringe group of Republicans as Bennett weighs a run for governor.
Okay, and it goes on. So that's brilliant, Lewis. Fox News, they do a segment where they say, here's some political news. The political news is you've got birthers in Arizona and they're questioning whether President Obama is eligible. That's hard news on Fox News.
Well, in their defense, at least they admitted that this is political positioning by this politician.
They didn't. They said that critics say that. They didn't actually say it themselves.
Well, I mean,
listen, Lewis, they're covering the story.
If they didn't want that out, they wouldn't have even claimed that it was critics at all. They wouldn't have said it at all.
Disagree with you. This is part of the carefully crafted balance. They say, well, we'll cover the story, it's a ridiculous story, but within the story, we'll put in a counterpoint to make it seem like it's a fair and balanced story. It's fine if the story contains views from both sides. The problem is you're covering the story. It's like, Lewis, if I say, well, today's news is Lewis a mass murderer? I say he may be. Lewis disagrees. Hey, look, I've given my view and I've given Lewis's view, but why am I doing a story on whether Lewis is a mass murderer? It's a nonsense story. You know what I'm saying? Just the fact that there's a dissenting view in there, that's not the problem. The problem that still doesn't solve the problem. Rather, they're covering this as real news.
They are covering this as real news, but this also could fall under the umbrella of entertainment, right?
Yeah,
it
they
is an
claim
entertaining.
it's not.
It is an entertaining story.
It
is technically political news.
They say it's okay. All right.
I just think this is a bad example because although I haven't been watching TV news the last couple of days, I'm sure they're covering this on CNN and a bunch of other stations. So I don't think it's specific to Fox.
It's an entertaining story. It's an entertaining story.
It's certainly entertaining, I'll say that. Okay, what did end up happening with that, by the way? So the other night, last night, Arizona Secretary of State Ken Bennett actually came out and said, I got that information from Hawaii. It proves Obama's an American, was born in the United States, and it satisfies Arizona's requirements for being on the ballot. So I guess that's it, Lewis. It's the end of the birther controversy, right?
For Ken Bennett.
Wait, probably not. And Obama is going to be on the ballot in Arizona.
I mean, I'm shocked he didn't claim it was a forgery.
It is shocking. It's definitely shocking. In an interview with AM Talk Radio, KTAR is the radio station, Ken Bennett said, if I embarrass the state, I apologize. Maybe he's actually somewhat self-actualized and he's figuring out how absurd this entire thing has been.
Is a nice apology. He did embarrass the state. But Arizona's seen a lot of embarrassment lately over the past few years.
I'll say.
Yeah.
Jan Brewer at the heart of it.
Wow.
Okay, what's happening with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman? Is the George Zimmerman case completely falling apart? We haven't heard much about the story recently, but a lot of the information that's been coming out in the discovery process seems to favor George Zimmerman's side of the story almost entirely. Okay, and here's one example. The Blaze's Madeline Morgenstern reported that the injuries suffered by Trayvon Martin, when compared with those suffered by George Zimmerman, could corroborate Zimmerman's account that Martin was the initial aggressor in the case. So the evidence has been released which says that surrounding the bullet wound, or rather that the bullet wound on Trayvon Martin was sustained from 1 to 18 inches away, or what's defined as intermediate range. Now, this is significant because Zimmerman claims he shot Martin at close range in self-defense against physical attacks. The autopsy is suggesting the shot was indeed made at close range, and given the asymmetry of injuries suffered by Martin compared to Zimmerman, it further backs up Zimmerman's alleged retelling of the story. Early information, many people would find the Blaze to be biased, but they appear at least to be reporting simply what the autopsy says. So that's one side. Do you think the Zimmerman case is falling apart? I mean, a while ago you said he's going to serve little or no time.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think his story is very hard to disprove because you have a situation in which he could have approached Trayvon, pulled a gun, and Trayvon acted in self-defense.
Sure.
And you also have a situation in which he approached Trayvon and Trayvon just attacked him unprovoked.
I agree with you 100%. Except that the fact that it could be either of those is reasonable doubt. which is what you need to get past in the trial. I completely agree with you. The reason this all could have happened could have been initially that Trayvon was pursued by Zimmerman. But if there's doubt about that, you're not going to get a second-degree murder conviction.
Right. So unfortunately, I mean, I think it's I think he's going to get away with murder.
And maybe murder is not the word legally. He will get away with having killed someone. Maybe legally is the way it'll turn out.
Right.
The other thing I really don't like is that now the Washington Post has reported that there's evidence of marijuana found in Trayvon Martin's urine and blood. And you know where this is going. All of a sudden, we start hearing, hey, listen, he was smoking weed. So therefore, we jump to what? The killing was warranted, which is such a big leap. Does everyone who smokes marijuana deserve to be shot under the stand your ground law?
Let's do that test on Zimmerman, too. I guarantee you, I can almost guarantee you that you'll find something similar.
Well, we have no evidence of that. You just think that Zimmerman seems like a guy who occasionally might smoke weed.
Yeah.
Natan, we need to somehow figure out how you can separate the negative connotation that people will have from hearing that Trayvon had smoked weed that day.
Well, I mean, can you even bring that into the court? I mean, is that even evidence?
I think you can. I think that may be admissible. That's an interesting question. Will it or won't it be admissible?
I don't know. It's going to be a stretch to convince the jury of that either way. I think that this is bad for another reason, which is that people are going to further identify young African Americans with drug use, which is just like the biggest problem that's coming out of that.
No question about that. All right, let's get to your email and voicemail. Here is one voicemail I got. You can leave your voicemail at 219-2-DAVID-P. Take a listen.
Nice job on your show, David. I've always loved Rachel Maddow's show, and so I can add another favorite to the lineup. However, looking for your David Pakman Show app for my iPhone. That would be totally awesome. So in the meantime, I'll look it up other means. But
okay, so here's the deal. The best way to get the David Pakman Show on your iPhone or mobile is we're on the Stitcher app. So download the Stitcher application. It's on iPhone and Android. Just search for the David Pakman Show. Use promo code David even. It'll automatically add the show to your favorites, and that's that.
Stitcher.
There you go.
Yep.
All right, I got an email from Mike about my hair on yesterday's show. David, please get a haircut. The little hair sprout on the right side of your face looks strange. It almost looks like a Bluetooth device. Yeah, we actually have, we could even put this up if you want to zoom in here, Natan. I identified that after the show. I've asked Lewis and Natan, if you see something bizarre on my hair, or once I actually had, like my shirt was over my jacket like this the entire show, nobody told me anything about it. And I think when I complained to you guys about it, you said it's just not your responsibility, you're busy doing production or something like that?
To be honest, I didn't notice in that situation. I mean, I do usually comment on your hair when it's ridiculous.
Right.
And Dave says, "Oh, there's nothing I can do about it. It's it does its own thing."
Yeah, but if there's a point pointing forward, let's try to somebody let me know.
Let's just keep a pair of shears in the studio, and we can do some work.
Also, another email I got from Marco. Hi, David. Do you have any Italian in your background? I can't help but notice that you talk with your hands a lot. It's actually interesting he mentions this because I'm from Argentina, and Argentina. Heavily influenced by Italian immigration. So I think it's common that while it's a Spanish-speaking country, a lot of the mannerisms and culture are very influenced by stereotypical Italian traits. Would you say that, Natan?
Yeah, and just like the hand gesture that you just did and the one that I'm doing is evidence of that.
Yeah, you guys are quite the gesticulators.
There you go. And of course, Lewis, being a Persian Jew, almost completely motionless during any discussion of any topic.
Yeah, what can you do?
Cory Booker. Bruce sent me an email about the Cory Booker situation. He says, thanks for sharing the down low on Booker. You guys are right on target, and it looks like he has been bought too. And you are right on regarding the corrosive effect of money in politics, as well as religion. Incredible stuff, Lewis. And on saying grace, Rick told me when he's Catholic, but he doesn't like saying grace. He says instead of doing a prayer for his meal, when he's been asked to say grace, he says a prayer for the poor, hungry, and homeless around the world, and then says amen, and people will usually feel so uncomfortable and surprised, they say amen, and that's the end of it. You don't end up having to do anything really too religious. Good idea.
Very good idea, yeah.
All right, that's it for the show. We'll talk to you on the bonus show. There's a whole other show that continues, davidpakman.com/membership. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow.
The The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.